I feel is very relevant to what's being discussed right now, I'll go ahead and jump in and interrupt you. Otherwise,
Okay.
we'll save them until the end, and we'll have a Q&A session as well.
Great.
So, all right, with that, I'm actually going to hand it right over to you, Keenan.
Okay, thank you very much. Like you probably know, if you read the intro, my name is Keenan Crow. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at One Iowa. One Iowa is the state's largest LGBT advocacy organization. We work towards full equality for LGBT Iowans through grassroots efforts in education. And, you know, we started out as that marriage equality organization, and now we've moved to more of a cradle-to-the-grave approach to equality, where we're looking at everything from issues of employment, which we'll be talking about today, to issues around the elder community, the law enforcement community, issues in the schools, et cetera. So we'll jump right in here with our presentation around gender issues in employment. So today, what I want to get out of this is that we'll understand the distinction between gender and sex, because those are often muddled in common language, and I really want to delineate those two terms and help understand why that matters. We'll understand the unique challenges faced by LGBT and gender variant employees of all sorts, and understand relevant local, state, and federal laws regarding sexual orientation and gender identity. And then we'll examine strategies for creating a gender-inclusive workplace, and that'll probably take the bulk of our time. So just starting out, you don't have to be an expert on LGBT culture to be culturally competent at all. You really just need basic information, a willingness to learn, and an openness to hear what someone's trying to tell you. So it's okay to get words wrong. It's okay to make an error in pronouns. That's how learning happens. You just have to be willing to learn. That's the important part, and make an effort. Everybody is understanding, and even I, who has worked at this organization for about 1.5 years now and work on this stuff on a daily basis, even I still make mistakes. So it's going to happen. You just have to understand that. So defining our terms. There's a big difference between sex and gender, at least in terms of how we should be using them rather than how we are using them on a daily basis. So sex is a biological distinction. It is what we're born with. It is what our chromosomes tell our body to do. It is our reproductive organs, etc., the endocrine systems that set up who we are on a biological level. This is completely biologically determined. There's no way to alter that, etc. Gender is a totally different beast. What gender means, it's a socially constructed ideal of manness or womanness, and this is probably best illustrated by bringing up the fact that when boys are kids, we give them, you know, maybe trucks, action figures, we paint their room blue, we have them wear blue clothes, etc. We make girls wear pink, we give them dolls, we give them sewing kits. These are all very gendered decisions that have absolutely nothing to do with our biological makeup at all. Sexual orientation is a little bit different than all of these in that this is an external thing. This is who we are attracted to. This is not necessarily us, but it's who we are attracted to. Gender identity is between your ears. You can't see it. It's all in your head. It's how you personally feel what your gender is. And then we'll go through transgender and cisgender here in just a little bit in more depth. So like I said, sex refers to hormones, chromosomes, reproductive anatomy, etc. Now, these may not be the same for any particular individual. For example, a person with male anatomy may dress, speak, and behave in a feminine manner, and vice versa. So sexual orientation is often confused with gender identity. People think if you're gay, you're trans, or if you're trans, you're gay, et cetera, but these are actually two separate things. It refers to primary romantic or sexual attraction towards other people. So a lesbian is an identity label for women who have primary sexual, romantic, or relational ties to other women. Gay is the same thing, but for men who have primary sexual or romantic attraction to other men. And then bisexual is an identity label for people who partner with either men or women. So according to the American Psychological Association, which is the largest association of its kind in the U.S., Sexual orientation is not a choice. It's not an illness or an emotional problem. You can't change it through therapy, though many have tried. Basically, the only results of that are that it makes you super, super miserable and you're still gay at the end. And then it's determined by many factors, usually at a very young age. We know that, for instance, gender identity is pretty much deep set before age 4. And it's different from sexual behavior. So you could, for instance, be someone who is gay identified but who had at one point had a relationship with a woman. You could be somebody who's lesbian identified but at one point had a relationship with a man. These are identity labels. They are not behavior labels. Gender identity is the persistent internal sense of being a man or a woman. We all have a gender identity, and for many of us, this matches the sex we were assigned at birth. But for transgender people, it does not. Our gender identity may or may not match our appearance, our body, or others' perceptions of us. So when we talk about transgender, this is an umbrella term, which I included a little umbrella there. It includes but is not limited to the following. People who identify as transgender, transsexual, genderqueer, gender fluid, agender, two-spirit, bigender, and some of the people that have disorders of sexual development. Now, this is a relatively new term. They were called intersex recently, and before that, a little bit of a vulgar term was hermaphrodite. These are individuals that are actually biological at the sex level, not the gender level, biologically indiscriminate in terms of their gender. They're either born with underdeveloped sets of reproductive organs, or maybe both sets, something to that effect. And they may identify as trans. They may not. They may, essentially have surgery early on and take hormones and live as the gender that they desire. Transgender people can decide to transition at any age. They may or may not change their names or their pronouns. They may or may not decide to use hormones or surgery. And essentially, there are a lot of trans people who are completely comfortable at whatever point they are. Maybe they've had one surgery and not the other surgery. Maybe they are just using hormones. And for some trans people, that's exactly where they want to be. They don't want to make that full transition, and it can be incredibly expensive. Hormones, not so much, but especially surgery. This can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and not a lot of insurance plans cover it at this point. So there are very good reasons that people may not want to make a full transition from their birth sex to some other gender. Now, what to do when you meet transgender people? Important thing, ask what they prefer to be called, use that name, ask what pronoun they prefer, and use that pronoun. So when we talk about pronouns, he, she, him, her, etc. And then avoid invasive and unnecessary questions. And this is, unfortunately, something that comes up all too often. You would never, never, never walk up to a stranger that you didn't know and ask them about their genitals. Okay, and this is, kind of supposed to be funny. But for some reason, people find this completely acceptable to do with trans people. They will constantly walk up to them and ask them about their genitalia. Well, you wouldn't even do that to your best friends, let alone some stranger you met on the street. And the same rules apply here. I mean, they don't just get thrown out the window because someone's trans. So, don't ask something that you wouldn't ask of your friends. Don't ask something of a stranger that you wouldn't ask something of another stranger just because they're trans. The genderbread person. I love the genderbread person. Can everybody see my mouse pointer? I'm not sure if they can or not.
It's coming through on my end.
Okay, good. So what we normally think when we talk about gender is we have a binary. We have either you're a man or you're a woman. And if you're a woman, you're expected to be feminine. You're expected to have the biological sex of a female. You're expected to date men, essentially. If you're born male, you're expected to identify as a man. You're expected to be masculine, and you're expected to date women. We know this isn't the case. It's not that simple. Everything is on a continuum. So you can go from any point on this line to any point on this line to any point on this line to any point on this line. So you could be, for instance, a genderqueer, feminine-presenting person who was born intersex and has a bisexual sexual orientation. You could be someone who was born a male but presents as androgynous, identifies themselves as genderqueer, and dates women. You can go from any one point to any other point. That's the really important part. And these are some of the concepts that we had talked about earlier. Gender identity is just between your ears. It's in your brain. Your orientation is who you're romantically attracted to. Your sex is your biological features. And then your expression is how you present yourself to other people. This is kind of the basic version of what we talk about when we talk about gender. And then we're going to go into a little bit more of an advanced version here. So this one also acknowledges that there are some people that are asexual, essentially, is what this breaks down to. So we have different lines for womanness and manness rather than one continuum. And we recognize that you can be, you know, for instance, if you're a woman, you don't have a whole lot on the manness. You can see this diagram here. You have a whole lot on the womanness. If you're a man, maybe you have a little bit on the womanness, a lot on the manness. If you're genderqueer, maybe it's some sort of blend of the two. If you're non-gendered, you have neither of those. It's the same thing with attraction. So if you're straight and you're female, you identify primarily attracted to males and not so much women. Gay, looks the same. If you're a man, you're still attracted to other men. Pan means you're equally attracted to both. Bisexual means you have different levels of attraction, but you're still attracted to both. Asexual means you're attracted to no one. So that's kind of the breakdown of how gender works in the real world. I do want you to remember that it isn't obvious who is LGBT. There's not some sort of pink tinted skin color or anything to that effect. I mean, most LGBT people, you would have no idea unless they told you that they were LGBT or talked about their partners, things to that effect. It's okay to ask questions about gender, partners, preferred pronouns, etc. when appropriate. And it's okay to feel awkward as you learn how to ask those questions. You're going to make mistakes, like I said. But there are no universals. Some LGBT people don't even like the term LGBT. So just like with any other social interaction, you're going to have to do some trial and error and feeling things out before you actually get comfortable with this. So trans discrimination, and this is a large part of what we're going to be talking about today. Trans people face many of the same types of discrimination that lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals face, but there's also a whole slew of other hurdles, including but not limited to things like government identity documents that don't reflect their gender and are prohibitively difficult to change, sex-segregated restrooms and other public facilities where it's often unclear where someone who's in the middle of a transition is supposed to go, dress codes which perpetuate traditional gender norms and are incredibly rigid and they can be punished for them, and then barriers to access to appropriate health care. And unfortunately, we've heard all sorts of horror stories about that. Many trans people are either not getting health care or they're going and driving 6, 8 hours just so that they don't have to go to their hometown doctor who they're worried about is going to out them. A little bit of a snapshot of a transgender life. 41% of transgender people can't change their gender on their forms of government identification. 57% were rejected by their families. 19% have experienced homelessness. Same percentage were refused medical care. And then 47% have attempted suicide. And that's a horrible, horrible number that needs to be remedied. Before I move on, just one quick thing that I would like to address is that these problems are not intrinsic to being a transgender person. For instance, the 47% suicide rate, not intrinsic to being trans. If discrimination was ended tomorrow, suicide rates would plummet. I mean, they would be essentially the same as the general population. These are not issues that have to go along with trans people. These are issues that arise from discrimination and discrimination alone. So, can you be fired for being gay? Is there a way to open this up so that I can hear responses from the audience at all?
There actually is not. We have to keep the lines muted because we've had problems with people putting us on hold, and then we have hold music over the facility.
Okay.
So, people do have the option to raise hands. We have virtual hands that are attached there that maybe you could say within the state of Iowa, if you feel you can be fired, raise your hand, and we could see how many hands raised.
Let's do that. So within the state of Iowa, can you be fired? If you think that you can for being either gay or trans, raise your hand. I can't see where these are going.
I can monitor that if you want to just take care of the presentation. I'm only seeing one hand raising.
Okay. Gotcha.
I'm going to blur the hands.
Okay, so you actually can't be fired for being gay or trans in the state of Iowa, but you can be fired in Nebraska and in Missouri, and I believe in Illinois you may be fired for being trans but not gay. Wisconsin is a little bit different because they're going through a transition right now. But you know, one thing to think about is how your rights are going to change depending on what state you're traveling through. If somebody has a business trip to go to, for instance, are they going to have the same rights when they're traveling through that state? Are they going to have access to health care? Are they going to, you know, have emergency room visitation for their spouse if they're both going? These things are really unclear, and that can be terrifying in certain situations. So these are all the states that prohibit discrimination. The orange ones prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So Iowa is included there. Thankful for our legislature. We are very proud of that. And then the purple ones are states that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation only. So like I said, Wisconsin, you can be fired for being trans but not for being gay. The laws referenced apply to public and private employers with some limitations in the respective states. Additionally, there are 9 states that have an executive order, administrative order, or personnel regulation prohibiting discrimination against public employees based on sexual orientation and gender identity. There are a couple states that prohibit discrimination against public employees based on sexual orientation only. So the Missouri order only covers the executive branch employees, for instance. And then in 23 states in the District of Columbia, state employees are provided with domestic partner benefits. So it's kind of a patchwork. It really depends. You know, if you have to go through a certain state, it's really unclear on whether or not your rights carry over. So discrimination is real. It's legally sanctioned. In 29 states, it's legal to fire a worker simply for being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. And in 32 states, it's legal to fire a worker based on their gender identity. And I'm being a little hyperbolic here by saying every LGBT person in the country knows this. It's probably not every LGBT person, but people that have to travel for business and things are definitely aware of this, and it can be scary, and understandably so, I think. There is an attempted remedy for this. It's called the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, and it's essentially a proposed bill in the United States Congress which would prohibit discrimination against employees on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. It has passed the Senate recently, but it's currently stalled in the House of Representatives, and we don't believe that it's going to come up for a vote there. But discrimination is not permitted in Iowa. So within this state, at least, 100% of the population is protected against discrimination based on sexual orientation. 100% of the population is protected against discrimination based on their gender identity. And then federally, Title VII and Title IX both provide protections for transgender students in college. So it is the law. Now what? Where do we go from here? What are some solutions to making sure that your workplace complies with these? I think the first step is designing a non-discrimination policy. It is easier than you think it might be, and there are some good reasons to adopt these. For one, it maximizes recruitment and retention of trained workers. An environment of fairness increases morale for everyone, and it improves employee productivity. For instance, transgender employees can focus on their work rather than worrying about their gender, and then non-transgender identified employees can focus on work and not the controversy around the trans employees. So there's about 6 situations that need solutions. I'm probably not going to address numbers 4 and 5 just because they're not as prominent. Most of the complaints happen from number 1 or number 2 in general. So we'll go into those in depth. But the areas are restrooms, harassment and hostile work environments, forms, identification cards, background checks, etc., gender-specific housing, showers and locker rooms, and dress codes.
I have something that came across. It's just now popped from one of our attendees that says that they raised their hand because an employee shared with us that she had been fired from a previous employer because of her gender identity, but they used a different excuse. So,
yes. That is definitely a problem, and people still do that, unfortunately. And if it's rather sophisticated, it's sometimes hard to prove in court. So that's absolutely true. By de jure, or by the law, essentially, it is illegal. De facto, or the fact of the matter is that some people can skirt that law. So it's not as strong as it could be. You're absolutely right.
And just so the attendees know that there's a couple people with their hands still up on their screen, my button to lower hands is not functioning. So if you have questions, please do direct message those to me. Thank you.
Great. So 3 principles in general when designing any sort of policy around these issues. First, to recognize self-identity regardless of surgery or documentation. So you're going to ask yourself, is this person's gender identity and expression being recognized in this situation? Once again, a lot of trans people are not going to have the transition surgery. A lot of trans people, may be on hormones, or they may not. They may present themselves differently. So surgery is not a good cutoff. It's not a good indicator. Understand and apply the concept of reasonable accommodation. Ask yourself, is this a situation where the typical policies or procedures are resulting in a trans person having to unfairly endure difficult or different conditions at work just because of the gender identity? Biases of customers or coworkers are not a valid or legally admissible reason for discrimination. So ask yourself if this is a situation where an entity is trying to accommodate the biases or lack of comfort, etc., with transgender people, customers, or others. So restrooms. Restrooms are the biggie. This is probably where almost all of the complaints are going to come from. Sometimes coworkers object to going to the same bathroom as a transgender person. And then the transgender person is told that they must use the bathroom that matches the sex they were assigned at birth, or they can use the appropriate bathroom only after they've had genital surgery. Sometimes a transgender person is asked to use a third bathroom. In one case I know of, a transgender woman is asked to use a porta potty that they installed for her. The supposed reasoning behind these policies is often that women are in physical danger if a transgender person is in a bathroom with them. And usually the fear is rooted in both sexism, the myth that people socialized as men will be able to control themselves around women, and heterosexism, which is the myth that people socialized as men are sexually attracted to women. It is less common for people to be afraid of transgender men in the bathroom, but transgender men are still vulnerable to hostility, harassment, and violence. It's important to remember that it is the transgender person who most often faces the potential of harassment and violence in the restroom, especially when they're forced to use a restroom that doesn't conform with their gender identity. And in no places that we are aware of have these laws led to assault of non-transgender people by transgender people in the bathroom. We have no documented cases of this occurring at all. The basic rule is this. A transgender person should be granted use of the restroom which corresponds to his or her gender identity. Pretty simple. The rule should apply regardless of the amount of surgery or other medical treatments a person has or has not had. Other points on bathrooms, coworkers may need to be educated or trained on why this rule is appropriate and why it's not a threat to them. Nearly all restrooms are constructed so that bodily privacy is not a legitimate concern. If for some reason the facilities are not constructed in that way, this can often be fixed by placing partial or full walls between toilets. This is significantly less of an issue than people think it is. Employees are going to take the lead of management. If management declares a policy, others are going to follow. And so it's helpful to have an attitude that indicates that this is no big deal, that this is not controversial. And just remember that in Iowa, it's the law. People have to be allowed to use the restroom that corresponds with their gender identity. So harassment and hostile work environment. This is another one where we will see complaints. Recognize factors that might be unique in creating a hostile work environment for a transgender person. Obviously, you already have a policy on hostile work environment for other groups of employees, but there are certain issues that may not be built into that. Things like a refusal to use correct pronouns, or apathy and carelessness, and never learning to use the correct pronouns. So somebody is always misgendering this other person. Maybe this person has transitioned to be Tina, and they keep calling her Roger and saying him and all this stuff, and it's very hurtful to this other person. And it's not like they're doing it as an accident. Obviously, there's a learning curve there. So, that has to be built into the policy as well, that there is a learning curve, that attempting and trying and making an effort is very much sufficient. But trying intentionally to misgender that person is harassment, absolutely, and it can have a very detrimental impact on that person's psyche. Asking excessively personal questions that would be considered inappropriate if asked of non-transgendered workers. This goes back to that thing of, not asking things of trans people that you wouldn't ask of other people. Discussing coworkers' personal business behind their backs, and this includes but is not limited to intentionally outing someone as trans who no one else knows is trans. We'll go briefly over ID cards. This can come up in a lot of different ways. So, for instance, a checkoff box for male or female on a job application form. If someone identifies as something slightly different, that can be a problem. Filling out an I-9 form, an employer might discover that their employee is transgender, and they hadn't previously known that. Entering a secure building, a person's asked for identification, or a background check reveals the person's old name or previous gender. Transgender person fills out forms with their current name or gender, even though they may be not legally changed, so it's not their legal name that they put on the form. So the solutions to this are not to discriminate after somebody is discovered to be transgender, and to make allowances for people who earnestly fill out forms or give information that matches their gender identity. So you may have a policy that they have to put their legal name on there. It may be the case that they would really like to have that changed legally, but simply are not able to, and so they put their preferred name on there, hoping that that's what they're going to be addressed as, et cetera. It can be a little bit confusing, so a little bit of leeway is really the best way to go. Dress codes, another thing that comes up occasionally. Employers would do best to institute dress codes that require clean, neat, well-groomed professional appearances, or gender-neutral uniforms. Those are really the best alternatives. Trans employees should be permitted to dress in accordance with the gendered dress standard, which is appropriate to their gender identity. If there is a gendered dress standard, for instance, and someone is transitioning to be a female, they should be allowed to wear what every other female in the office is wearing. They should be allowed to wear skirts, dresses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Discrimination on the basis of gender expression is prohibited by law, and there's no exception for dress codes. So telling a trans person that they can't dress as their preferred gender is actually a legal form of discrimination, or an illegal form of discrimination. Gender transition guidelines. This is a new thing that's kind of coming up, and some companies have been instituting it just to make things a lot easier on everybody involved. So instituting protocols for gender transitions that clearly delineate responsibilities and expectations of transitioning employees, their supervisors, colleagues, and other staff. Doing this before you have a transgender employee is way easier than doing it right after someone comes out. There can be some resentment that builds up just because, the HR person all of a sudden has a whole pile of extra work to do that they didn't have before. It can be very uncomfortable for the trans person because they have no idea what they're doing, where they're going, what's expected of them, et cetera, because there's no clear policy spelled out. So spelling these out well before you have a trans employee can save everybody a load of headache. These policies should address who in the business is charged with helping a transitioning employee manage his or her workplace transition, what a transitioning employee can expect from management, what management's expectations are for staff, transitioning employees, and the existing LGBT employee group in facilitating a successful workplace transition, and what the general procedure is for implementing transition-related workplace changes, such as adjusting personnel and administrative records, as well as a communication plan for coworkers and clients. Another thing that I would say is helpful is answers to frequently asked questions about dress codes and restroom use, just so people, aren't confused there. A couple other quick suggestions, nothing to do with some of the things we've been talking before with specific policy changes, but just some things on a personal level. Changing your language can be incredibly helpful. So rather than saying your husband or wife, you could say your partner, he or she, etc. Same thing with forms. Rather than putting husband or wife on a form, just put spouse. That's way easier, and then you don't have to change your forms anyway. Mirror language people use for themselves and their partners. So if somebody refers to their partner in a certain way, use that way to refer to their partner as well. Post and enforce all anti-discrimination policies. That part is the law, but it also increases morale and makes for more productive workers when they know they have those protections in place. And then show your openness. Wear or post LGBT inclusive stickers and pins. Put a safe space sticker in your office window or something. And assuring confidentiality, making coming out safe, making sure that people know that they're able to come out after they've been working for the company for a while, making sure that everybody feels comfortable enough to be their whole selves at work. So for more information, I have a few websites here if you want to jot those down. National Center for Transgender Equality is really the powerhouse organization working on a lot of these issues. We love them to death. They're great. Transgender Law Center, also a fantastic organization that works specifically on trans legal issues. Lambda Legal, who we work with really closely and who is actually pretty much responsible for marriage equality here in Iowa. We have a very close relationship with them, and they are amazing people. And then Transformations Iowa. And Transformations is the local trans support group that meets in the Mickle Center down in the Sherman Hill area every Wednesday at 7 p.m., and this is for trans people. So if you have any trans employees and you would like to send them to a trans exclusive support group, that is definitely an option. And if you have any questions about those, you can definitely email or call or head to the website and let us know. But I will open it up for questions here now.
Yeah, I'm going to allow the attendees a few minutes to send those questions in, and I'm going to reiterate some of the announcements that I had at the very beginning. If you are here for the HRCI credits, you do need to stay until the very end of the call. I will release that certificate number at the end there. We do have some upcoming events as far as the Greater Des Moines Partnership is concerned. The first being our annual Inclusion Award. This is the only award given out at our annual dinner, which is a very, very big event. We have 3 categories, small, medium, and large business, in which you can apply for this award. So if your company does wonderful things in the world of diversity and inclusion, we definitely want to see an application from you. If you know of a company or work for a company that does great things, you can nominate them as well, and then I will reach out to that company to seek out their application. Our next event upcoming will be our multicultural reception. That will be on November 6th. It'll be hosted at John Deere. So with that, we before this multicultural reception in the fall, we actually have a career fair. So we have the potential to host up to 40 different career agencies or employers. And so if you want a booth at that, go ahead and sign up on our website, DesMoinesMetro.com. You can find it in our event registration. If you just want to attend the career fair or you just want to attend the actual multicultural reception itself, the registration is there as well, DesMoinesMetro.com. We do have a question that's coming through right now. One, I've received a couple of these asking for access to the presentation after today. We will have the presentation and the recording that will be posted at DesMoinesMetro.com as well. It'll be on our diversity and inclusion page.
Great.
And then, Keenan, do you do presentations for private organizations?
Sure do. Yeah, absolutely.
So his information is there as well. I know most of you on this call, I recognize a lot of the names know me, so you can always come to me as well if you're trying to figure out how to get a hold of Keenan if you can't find this presentation.
Yeah, we've done all sorts of presentations, from everything from hospitals to jails to we did one for the USDA recently. So yeah, absolutely, we can do them for pretty much any organization.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come through, so I'm going to stop the recording.